All right, good morning. I'd like to welcome you to today's video lecture on modules 40 and 41 in Unit 8 for AP Psychology. Today's learning objectives, as you can see here, we're going to start to focus on some different theories regarding how we experience emotion and also look at some issues regarding the expression and detection of emotion. So let's start first with some theories here this morning. What I'd like to do is take a look here again, just at our definition of emotion and in particular what it involves. We know it is subjective in the sense that not everyone experiences it the same way, but it does involve three key components: our body's reaction, which is our physiological arousal, expressive behaviors such as facial features and body language, and it is a conscious experience as well. What we want to do next is start to look at some of these key theories of emotion, and we're going to start with what we call the common sense approach. And with each of these theories, it's a matter of timing between the stimulus, whatever seems to trigger the emotion, our perception of that, the actual emotional sensation, and then the body's reaction. So when you look at the common sense theory, it works like this. It says basically there's going to be something in our environment that triggers an emotion. Our mind needs to perceive it. Then we feel the emotion associated with that perception, and then our body reacts. So here you have a situation where maybe there's a tiger that you encounter as you're walking here between North and South Campus. It looks pretty hungry. You perceive it as being a dangerous situation, knowing that tigers and humans don't often get along. You feel afraid, and then your body begins to react. And we know from Unit 3, part of that reaction is a pounding heart, shortened breath. We called it the fight or flight response. So the common sense approach says that it's ordered that way: stimulus, perception, emotion, then our body reacts. We want to contrast that with the James Lange theory. And here I have this scenario. Let's say you're in a parking lot and you see a shadowy figure here, kind of a sketchy guy, and you don't know what he's holding in his other hand there, and he approaches you, and then it's just you and him, and he says, "Hey, what's your hurry?" You see that stimulus, and according to the James Lange theory, what happens next is your body reacts. So if you look at step 2 here, here we're talking about the physiological arousal. So your heart begins to pound fast, you begin to tremble, and then you feel the experience of the emotion, which is fear. So James Lange has a little different order here compared to the common sense theory. Basically, the bodily arousal is switched here with the emotional response. So James Lange says we experience the body first, then the emotion. We compare that with Cannon-Bard. The Cannon-Bard theory says basically same stimulus here, the shadowy man in the distance approaching you, and simultaneously your body reacts and you experience the motion. So there is no first or second here. They happen together. By they, I mean the body reaction and the emotion. So where James Lange says your body is going to react first, then you experience the emotion, Cannon-Bard says they both happen at the same time. Now I want to bring in another factor here. We're going to call it Schachter's two-factor or Schachter's cognitive theory. Here's how this one works. You're going to see the stimulus, the shadowy figure, the man in the distance here. The next step is your body does react, the arousal state. You begin to tremble, heart beats fast, plus what Schachter called a cognitive label. Schachter, along with another psychologist by the last name of Lazarus, both believe that there is some cognitive appraisal that needs to take place. You have to determine, again, why is my body reacting? Is this really a dangerous situation? Is this a situation where I need to feel afraid? And once you make that cognitive appraisal, then you experience the emotion of being afraid. You may decide that, this really isn't a dangerous situation. Maybe it's your big brother just acting crazy here, and you may experience relief instead. But it comes down to that cognitive label. Okay. So this ties into a couple others. I mentioned Lazarus already. He's very similar to Schachter, that basically some cognitive appraisal needs to take place. I want to tie in these other two theorists here, Zients, that's how you'd say that first one, and Ledoux. They basically agreed or argued that not every emotional response requires some sort of appraisal. Some things are just automatic. Ledoux called it the low road, so some basic instinctual reactions of fear, aggression, some of those are just automatic. Those would be the low road. You don't have to think about them. Where the high road would be situations where you do have to interpret some things. So just kind of keep these in mind, Lazarus, Ledoux, and Zients as well. Now we look at detecting emotion in others, and this is some things that we're going to notice here in Module 42. One of the big things, of course, is some nonverbal cues. Okay, and we're going to do some work with this here in our psych sim entitled Expressing Emotion. And one of the interesting things that this point gets into is the idea of the Duchenne smile, which is named after a famous researcher here who did some work looking at the elements of facial expressions, and in particular, which smile was authentic and which smiles are not. Here you can see this image. This is taken from your book, and one of these smiles, according to Duchenne, is authentic, and one is not. I'm going to keep you in suspense here. You can either look it up in your book or ask me when you get to this point in the video, and you might even be able to make your own assessment. In terms of culture, we know that culture does play a role in how we display emotion, and we call these display rules. How, why, and when certain expressions of emotion are appropriate. Our body language, gestures also play a role depending on culture in terms of personal space and just greetings and different types of expressions. One of the things we also know, though, is that when it comes to recognizing facial features, especially some of the universal emotions, culture doesn't always play a role, or race doesn't always play a role. When you see these faces here from non-Western or non-Caucasian cultures, you can still notice the basic emotions, even though their facial features may be different. A smile is still a smile, surprise is still surprise, sad, anger, disgust, etc. When it comes to gender and emotion, we know this, that men and women do feel emotions equally, but there are some differences in expression. Men do tend to be less expressive. Doesn't mean they experience any less degree of emotion. They're just not as likely to display that in terms of verbalizing it or through facial expressions. We also know this, that females do have a higher emotional intelligence in the sense that they are better at reading nonverbal cues and recognizing faces and things of that nature. Here's a picture from your book where also gender can play a role. They tried to do a computer generated gender neutral face. And most people, when asked, when they saw the angry face, if you will, on the left, assumed that that was a male, and that the face that was smiling on the right was a female. And this points out that we do tend to associate certain emotions with certain genders, anger, aggression, more male. Sorry about the lights there. Another interesting thing here covered in Module 42 is the facial feedback theory. This kind of ties into the James Lange theory, the idea that your facial expressions in your body in particular dictate how you feel. Here they took a situation with a chain of rubber bands and some tape, and they had the individual basically do a forced smile, and then likewise here with the rubber bands under the chin, a forced kind of frown. And based on the shape of the mouth, they assessed the person's emotional response to different items. And when the rubber bands were taped here to force the smile, there was a more general positive reaction. And when the mouth was forced in a downward position, there was a more negative reaction. So we call this the facial feedback. So the tendency of our facial muscles to trigger corresponding feelings. So when someone tells you just a smile, it might make you feel better. They may not be all that far off. All right. I want to thank you for listening this morning here at modules 41 and 42.